Together, we welcome you to what we hope will be a productive series of events designed to engage and inform the community in ways that go beyond traditional print and digital media. Seated with us today are leaders from the town and state government, along with other community members who either work to create or have been affected by a lack of affordable housing. Joe and Virginia will introduce them in a moment, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions or offer thoughts as well. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. Joe or Virginia will come around. Please speak into the microphone, which I can tell you right now is not so easy finding the sweet spot. And state your name and keep your comments brief, 1 minute or less. I'd like to thank our sponsors for the East Hampton Press Sessions. Rocco Carrero Wealth Partners. Rocco and Meredith Diamond are here today. Thank you both. I'd like to also thank the law offices of Toomey, Latham, Shea, Kelly, Dubin, and Cortorero. John Shea and members of the firm are also here today. Thank you all. And two businesses who have been very good to us over the years with our sessions and who are incredibly involved in the community. They have sponsored our events in Sag Harbor and now in East Hampton. Adam Miller Group and Advantage Title, represented here today by Chris Nuzzi. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you all for being here today. If this is your first press session event, it's very informal and it's meant to be a conversation. And we want to include everybody as much as we can. Virginia Garrison, who is the editor of the East Hampton Star, is co-hosting this one with me. Take two, please. Well, Freudian slip. Sorry about that. The editor of the East Hampton Press will be co-hosting with me. And we will be circulating through the crowd to hand the microphone out and ask questions. So please just let us know, catch our eye when you have a question. And as Ellen said, keep it as brief as possible. And try to ask a question or offer a comment that we can continue the conversation. So we'll get started, and I'm going to introduce the panel left to right. Virginia and I are going to actually tag team this. We're going to go left to right, and we've provided each of the panelists with a question ahead of time so that they could prepare an answer to get started here. So we'll begin to my left with Gail Simons. She is a mother of two from Springs. She's a former Montauk resident, I believe, right? And she is here offering a point of view that we did not have at our Southampton session, and I'm really pleased she's here. She's bringing the point of view of somebody who's been through this. She's experienced the challenge of finding affordable housing firsthand throughout the region. So, Gail, the first question is, can you open this discussion by just talking about your experience looking for affordable housing out here for you and your family? Tell us in a nutshell what the biggest hurdles were in your personal experience and how the search for a place to live affected your life.
Both as a working.
I think you get
Hello?
Right down into it.
Both as a single mom and with a family. Recently, a year ago, I found a house, $2,000 a month as a single mom, and that was you either get really lucky or really creative in order to find housing out here. That was a one-bedroom house with my two kids. $2,000 a month, and quite frankly, I made enough to pay my rent, but I didn't make enough. That was existing. It wasn't living. It was working constantly to pay it. When I got to the reason that rent was so low, it was a friend from long ago that agreed to give me a house at a very dirt cheap rate. He was constantly hounded throughout the year from real estate agents that said that he could get well over $3,000 a month for that house. And as we came to the end of my term, he decided that's what he wanted to do. So I was left scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. At $48,000 a year, if you do a rental calculator, it says that I could comfortably live on $1,200 a month rent. And that doesn't exist. I also don't qualify for affordable housing as far as Section 8 or anything like that goes. So I'm kind of in this gray area where I don't qualify for any assistance, And yet I wouldn't be able to afford comfortably what the town considers the affordable apartments at $1,600 a month, which are also two-bedroom apartments. I had a couple of years ago applied for to be on the town housing list, and at the time was told there's a 4 to 6 year wait. With kids in high school, I don't even know where that goes in 4 to 6 years. I have lived on more than one occasion for a long period of time in a tent, waiting for one rental to come up, and get into another rental. And it's not for lack of having an income. I don't really think that $48,000 a year income is something terrible. I should be able to afford to live on that, and I should be able to afford to support my family, and I can't. So that's where I'm at. Right now, I'm bunking in with my parents, and the idea is to put money into their home so that we can they benefit and I benefit. But their house is not suitable for us at this time, so it's a stretch. Everything I own is in storage, and we're working to that end right now.
And I think it's a pretty standard story for a lot of people on the South Fork.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Gail.
You might have to hold it.
Thank you, Gail. That's probably hard to tell. Left my question here. We have Tom Ruhle here, too. Tom is, he's the head of the town office. Okay. Yeah, okay. At some point, I'm going to ask Tom to distinguish between that and Katie's office. But your question today, the first question is basically, in broad strokes, what can you say about the town's efforts over the years to help people like Gail secure affordable housing? What has the town found to be the biggest obstacles? I suspect that part of that is that East Hampton Town in particular has preserved a lot of land at the affordable housing, and that may or may not have backfired to some extent. And obviously the second home market has a very large effect on year-round affordable housing out here. Can you talk about what the town has done and what it's found to be successful?
Well, ultimately, I think the town has had a history going back to 1980, going back to one of the first projects, which was Olympic Heights, and then Camp Hero, Whalebone Woods. Pat Chunzo, when he was on the town board, did a lot with that, and Randy Parsons. And it's over time we have built apartments, we have built single-family homes, we're building condos now. We've legalized apartments and single-family residences. We've encouraged apartments over stores and commercial structures. In terms of what's the biggest threat, what's causing all this, it's second homeowners. Now, people don't like it sometimes when I tell that, but I said, and Banff had the same problem, and Banff just banned second homes. Now, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we ban second homes, owners and second homes, but we have to recognize that the land transfer tax, the 2% land transfer tax, which has raised over $1/3 billion, which has been invested in essentially not building anything on land, was directly a result of that second homeowners gobbling up all the open space and putting undue stress on the environment. So we did that, and that worked really well for that. But during the same period of time, a funny thing happened due to various amounts of circumstances that are kind of like, well, it happened. In 2019, 19% of the town's budget was committed to home and community services. That's in 2009. In 2018, it's now 12%.
So I'm sorry, the first number was 2009.
2009, 19% of the town budget was committed to what's called home and community service. And that includes a whole bunch of things. Real-time spending went from $13,225,000 roughly to $10 million now. During the same period of time, I add that culture and recreation went from 10% of the town budget to 5%. Simultaneously, public safety spending went from 32% to 39% of the town budget, and general support to general government went from 16% to 25%. So as much housing as we've built, we have been overrun by second homeowners, Airbnb, Vimeo, the idea that you can simply make more money not renting to local people than you can in other things. However, I think that given all this bleakness, and I don't want to voice of bleakness, the town is in the process of buying land and is in the process of negotiating to buy other land. And I really do think there is a renaissance on the horizon, which I did not plan this as a transition to the next speaker, but this was going to be my summary. There is, and that's that additional to the land transfer tax, which I'm assuming I can pass. Well, you'll pass this.
Yes, absolutely. Which brings us to Assemblyman Fred Thiele. Fred has written state legislation that would create the Community Housing Fund, and this would be modeled on the CPF, but actually use a 0.5% transfer tax to fund affordable housing on the on the East End. It'll allow the towns to adopt this once it's been approved by both houses of the state legislature, and it's on its way to the governor's desk before the end of the year. It would go before the voters in the 5 towns if they choose to do it in 2020. So, Fred, let me ask you, tell us more about how you see this working as far as a partial fix of the problem. How much money could be expected to be raised in a year in East Hampton town with this new fund? And how much housing do you think that would buy, and what's the best way to spend it?
Well, first of all, I think that Virginia Garrison should make you wear a New England Patriots jersey this week. But he's a Steeler fan, as am I.
As are you.
The legislation is fairly simple as far as the concept. It's very similar to what we've done with the Community Preservation Fund, except the purpose is different. And, you know, the goal here, and certainly as someone who chairs the Local Governments Committee in the Assembly, is the idea here is to provide local governments, in this case the 5 East End towns, with the tools they need. East Hampton Town has had an exemplary record on affordable housing, as Tom mentioned, going back to Olympic Heights. I think they've done more than any other town out here. It still isn't enough, and it requires more resources. So in summary, what the bill does is it creates a dedicated fund. The fund would be financed by an additional 0.5% on the real estate transfer tax. On the other side of that, the real estate transfer tax exemption, which was set at $250,000 in 1998, when we thought that the median cost of a house in 1998 was about $250,000, would be increased to $400,000 in East Hampton and Southampton. Now, the practical effect of the addition and subtraction of that is basically the effect on real estate transfers under the new law versus the old law is that if you were closings for $1 million or less would actually pay less in taxes than they pay now under the current law. And on the North Fork, it would be if you were $800,000 or less, you'd pay less. And that is more than half of the transactions out here. So the purposes of the fund basically is to allow the towns to do what they do now. It's a broad cross-section. They could provide financial assistance to first-time home buyers. They could actually produce affordable housing for rent or for ownership. They could work with public-private partnerships. They could work with employers for employee housing. They could provide housing counseling. They could rehabilitate existing buildings. They would first have to do a community housing plan. All of this is subject to a referendum. Your questions about how much money would this generate? It would generate in East Hampton probably somewhere in the range of about $5 to $6 million a year. Now, I think, you know, how much housing does that create? Well, I think I will leave that to the town maybe as part of the discussion because, you know, if you go down the road of helping first-time home buyers with financial assistance, I mean, there's a wide variety, there's a wide menu of things they could use the fund for. So I think they are best equipped to decide how to do that.
I want to come back to you later and ask about an idea that you've talked about for using some of the money to have a partnership type of a situation for buying houses. Virginia.
Our next panelist is J.P. Foster. J.P. is president of the East Hampton School Board, and we asked him to come to speak to how the shortage of affordable housing affects the East Hampton School District, which is probably emblematic of the effects that the other school districts in East Hampton town would feel. So I was hoping that JP could talk a little bit as school board president about what the district did.
Thank you very much. Actually, first, thanks for inviting the school district to be a part of this conversation. Is that better? There we go. Be part of the conversation. I think it's the first time that we've actually been engaged in something like this in quite some time, at least in my tenure on the board, which is about 6 years. East Hampton School District, if you break it down, probably has the most, I know it has the most on the East End, affordable housing within its district lines, which is because we're also the biggest district. But by default, it sets a problem sort of for us because we have the most amount of kids, obviously, that get paid for through that program. And with pilots and the pilot funds and how much is allocated to the school district, it's a small amount if you look to see how much money the district gets for each project. I think it's critical, and I think it's something that's been talked about for a long time to sort of spread it out a little bit. And of course, it comes down to real estate, and real estate is the underlying factor with all of it as to where it can go, where the open space to allow it exists. But it also has to be thought as to how does it impact that district. And I know a lot of the other districts are smaller, so they get affected at a greater level with fewer children. But it definitely affects us. And I think one of the things that you'll see is at the end of the beginning of the school year, the shift. And you'll see, every year your numbers, as school starts, people are scrambling to find housing. So they're going to either affordable housing if they can get it, but they go to the de facto affordable housing as well. What's the best deal? What can they get, at the last minute? Their children need to go to school, so they need a place to live. So they go and they find the de facto affordable housing.
Thank you, JP. Sylvia Overby is a member of East Hampton Town Council, and she has been involved in the town's affordable housing efforts. Sylvia, you were instrumental in bringing back the Manor House project, which had been shelved for many years. It's the first condominium homeownership project in East Hampton, and you've said that maybe it's the first affordable housing condo project on Long Island. What did that involve, and how many units will it produce, and who does it benefit? Is it something that may, for instance, have been beneficial for Gail?
The answer is it could have been if she's on the list and she can qualify for the list. It is home ownership, and I think the condos are the wave of the future because we have not as much land as we would hope. That condo home ownership is going to be something that we're going to see duplicated over and over again. It was a project that had been shelved. I saw it when I was on the planning board. It had come through the planning department, and it was very unique in that there were each unit was a little block. It could have been a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, or a 3-bedroom, and the blocks could fit together in different ways. So it could be put on different parts of types of land. So and it could be configured in different ways so that it still looked like one house, and within one house could be 3 or 4 different units. So it looked at the vernacular of East Hampton. They were shingled, pitched roofs, and it was something that needed to come back. As I said, it had been shelved, and we brought it back. And now the architect for that, who was given us the plans and the idea for that for East Hampton to use again and again, now sits on the Housing Authority Board. So he's been instrumental, I think, in helping us look at affordable housing. Again, it's a condominium, and so I actually had to reach out to Fred at one point in time because condominiums are a different animal and that they needed to have a condominium offering, an offering plan. And when those offering plans sometimes aren't exactly in how the the building is constructed, there might be a change in the building plan, then you have to go back to the Attorney General and redo your offering plan. So that's been a little bit of a hurdle, and one of the things I think we're learning as we go forward and do this again and again, that we will again have to go back and figure out how to tighten those kinds of things up. The next project, I hope, can also be one that could be, again, rental, but it could be a smaller piece of property. We could fit these units in this manor house idea. As I said, it looks like one house, so it could fit in different neighborhoods. It would be accepted in almost every neighborhood because it looks just like your house next door. And I think that's one of the keys to affordable housing, is that it doesn't look out of place. It has to look and be accepted by those within the community. And that's one of the reasons I think the Manor House project is going to be duplicated over and over again.
Katie Casey is our next panelist, and she is in charge of the Housing Authority. One thing I wanted to ask Katie was the distinction between the Housing Authority and the Office of Housing and Community Development that Tom Ruhle is director of. And I was hoping also that Katie could tell us something about the Gansett Meadow affordable housing project that's now well under construction on Montauk Highway in Amagansett, very visibly, and ask Katie who's going to live there, how's the cost working out per unit of the housing that's going to be provided there. That's a few questions.
Okay. With regard to the first question, the Office of Housing and Community Development is a department of the town of East Hampton. So that is a municipal office. It's a town office staffed by town employees. The Housing Authority is, in fact, a state agency created by the Constitution of the State of New York. So we are technically state employees. OHCD, and I'm going to try to not slip into that whole acronym slope, but OHCD receives funding for the Section 8 program. They qualify the subrecipients. They determine the income and the rental subsidy amounts. OHCD also administers the Community Development Block Grant Program, which are funds not specifically or not exclusively for housing, but also for community development projects such as making a building accessible, supplementing the salaries or operating costs for community service agencies. So there's a whole array of community subrecipients. The Office of Housing and Community Development, they go through the process of qualifying and making sure that money gets to the end users for which it is intended. OHCD also, and incidentally, I worked there for 12 years, so I'm really not speaking out of school here. OHCD also does ownership programs. Typically, through that program, the town acquires the land. Potential buyers are qualified. They still have to qualify for a mortgage. They still have to go through credit checks and all the usual checks involved there. The town will lease the lot to the buyer who contracts with the builder. So that is, it's a complicated structure. It works for the town. We have been able to get quite a few people into ownership that way. And the various homeownership projects have evolved over time. As new information comes to light, they'll change the program to make sure that that housing stock remains affordable in perpetuity, which is a tricky thing to achieve, but Tom and his staff have achieved that. as well with town staff, I should say. The town attorney's offices and the planning department are also obviously very involved in those programs. So the Office of Housing and Community Development is a public housing agency. The East Hampton Housing Authority is like a public service enterprise. We are a separate corporation. We're a body corporate and politic, so 1 foot public, 1 foot private, not unlike the Water Authority or the Transportation Authority. We are a housing authority. We are not direct recipients of any funding except when we're in development. When we're in development, we're partnering with, at the moment with Amagansett, with a private developer. Some things the private sector does better and some things the public sector does better. We are very fortunate in that we have an excellent partner in Georgia Green Ventures. So between us, we can get it done, which is, you got to get it done. The Housing Authority, we're property managers. We deal with tenant issues. We maintain the property. We collect the rents. We deal with, tenant disputes, that kind of thing, snow plowing, lawn mowing, all those things that the Housing Authority, that the OHCD does not have to do because they don't manage the properties. The Housing Authority manages the public housing, the affordable rentals. So the Housing Authority has its own board of commissioners. The commissioners are appointed by the town board. The town board essentially directly oversees the operations of the Office of Housing and Community Development. The Housing Authority Board of Commissioners directly oversee the operations of the Housing Authority. So it's hard to tell where one stops and the other starts. Is it necessary to have both? Yes. If we are successful, if the offices, the agencies have good communication and we do cross referrals and we're aware of what's available out there, it may seem seamless. People frequently don't know the difference between the Housing Authority and the Housing Office. But there are, structurally, it's more of a three-legged stool than a two-legged stool, having both the OHCD and the Housing Authority.
Katie, can I ask you, you really are the organization that does the outreach directly to people to help them find housing. Is that correct?
Both agencies do.
Both agencies do?
Yeah, both agencies do. And, there are also a few private nonprofits, Whalebone, Windmill, St. Michael's. We all communicate with one another. We have many mutual clients. There's always cross-referral. If someone comes to us and we feel we can't assist them, but another agency can, we can give them that information. And sometimes by the end of the process, the prospective buyer or tenant's head is spinning because they've talked to so many people and been to so many offices. But that is just us making sure they land where they need to land.
And I have to tell you that there's a person in the room today who didn't feel comfortable coming on microphone and saying it, but asked me to relate that they still live in the area because of you, Katie, and your intervention on their behalf, and that likely wouldn't have been the case if you hadn't done that. So kudos to you for that. So you have at least one success story in this very room.
I appreciate that, and I'm very proud of that. But I may be the person they remember. I might have been the face of it, but there were 100 other people, I'm sure, involved in making that happen.
Fair enough. Okay, so absolutely, Tom.
I want to just amplify what Katie said. There's also the third leg is the nonprofits, and Windmill Village nonprofit, which owns St. Michael's and Amagansett, Windmill 1 and Windmill 2, and Whalebone Village Apartments, which owns Whalebone Village, are separate nonprofit corporations that manage those projects. They're sometimes perceived as, well, they're town projects. And as Katie pointed out, there's a lot of interrelationships. We have Section 8 clients in the Housing Authority properties. There were Section 8 clients at Whalebone. There were Section 8 clients at Windmill 2, but not at Windmill 1 because it was a different funding source. None at St. Michael's. It's hard because people think that a lot of these, but there are separate entities set up for specific purposes. And you need that, as Katie called it, the tripod. But that Windmill and Whalebone are private ventures, albeit with a lot of town help to come into being, but they are private ventures.
Okay. I want to open it up to questions from the audience now. I'm going to come to you first, but I'm going to actually walk towards the back of the room, both to give everybody back their chance and because I feel the need to hide at the moment. But as I walk back, I wanted to ask Mr. Ruhle. Tom, you threw some statistics out earlier about the town budget and how housing has affected it. Can you put that into layman's terms, what those figures meant? What's the impact that what's the point you're making with those figures? How has it impacted the town budget? With the microphone, please.
Well, I think the only point I was trying to make was that maybe back in 2009, a greater portion of the town budget went toward human services. And because of the problems with the town financial crisis, a change in administrations that put housing and stuff on hold, there was a dead period of time, and there were staff reductions. And my department used to have more people than it currently has.
Tom, can you lift your microphone up a little bit?
And my department used to have more people. We used to be a HUD certified housing counseling agency. Katie was our counselor. We have not been able to replace that position. So there has been a diminution of service as a result of a reduction in the percentage of the town budget that went towards, housing issues. That was just the point I was making. It's kind of one of those things flies under the radar, but it's out there.
Okay, fair enough. We have a question from the audience.
My name is Lenny Ackerman. I come to this meeting because I have a particularly personal interest in this. First, is there anyone here from the village government, village administration? No. It's ironic that we're in the village and we're discussing affordable housing. All right? Affordable housing is an issue affected me personally when in 2017 my wife was terminally ill. And I went to the village and I asked the village and proposed legislation with my colleague Andy for workforce housing so we could house nursing staff in our property. I find it shameful that this village can spend $4.8 million to buy a lot on Hook Pond that benefits a parking lot when they can't find a piece of property in this municipality in which I've lived over 55 years to provide workforce housing. When my staff just recently asked me, my secretary and my law clerk, that they could not find a home, a place to live, I went out and I looked at real estate to buy for workforce housing, and it was shameful what I saw people were renting and at what price, most of which was illegal. No C of O's, no handicap services, no fire, no safety. It was shameful. And yet, we're in the village. It's ironic. There's no one here from the village. What is wrong with this village? You, Peter, Sylvia, this town has done an excellent job in 55 years. And where does the village step up? I hear, just want to say this. I really think that if we could take something away from this, you've done a terrific job, but someone has to send the message that this is a partnership. The village within the town of East Hampton should be participating in providing workforce and affordable housing. So I hope that this message, either through the press or through someone, can make an impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ackerman. Fred, let me ask you, it's a problem that crosses jurisdictions, and all the different villages and towns face it, and you really do have to have buy-in from every municipality, don't you? I mean, it's not something that the town alone can do.
Well, first of all, under the law, every municipality, every village, every town has a responsibility for their share, and the court never really defines what their share is. I guess it's case by case, but each municipality has a responsibility for their share of providing for a balanced housing plan, providing affordable housing. The way we set up this legislation because funding is key to this. I mean, I said East Hampton does an outstanding job, and they do, but they only have so much resources to be able to put towards affordable housing. Just as 20 years ago, we only had limited resources for protecting environmentally sensitive land as we tried to, so that conservation could keep pace with development. Well, the idea here is to provide more funding so that the demand for housing, that the supply can at least get closer to what the demand is. But the way that this legislation is written is that the towns would work with the villages. The villages would have the ability. It's the town administers the fund, but the villages, which by the way generate a great deal of the money under the transfer tax, would have the ability to participate in the formulation of the plan for the town and would be eligible to work with the town for funding. So your answer is yes. Everybody has, in fact, they have a legal responsibility to provide for their share of a balanced housing plan. That's Berenson versus Newcastle for you lawyers in the audience. And that's why the legislation reflects that towns and villages would both participate together in the fund.
Tom, you have something to add?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing on that in defense of the village. For the first time, and I mean for the first time very recently, the village has invited me to come to planning meetings involving the sewage district that the village is looking at, and with the blessing of the current town board, I've been attending those meetings and working, and I think there is an effort by some people in the village to start working with the town and availing themselves of the resources, and at least my office for looking at the affordable housing issues.
Sure. Katie?
Len, I'm certain you don't remember this, but your office actually handled the closing on my house in 1999, which was the lowest price paid for an improved property in 5 zip codes, which I could not have purchased without substantial help from my mother and my sister. So, and I know that you cut me a deal, and I thank you for that. There is a term, inclusionary zoning, that is, it's not really that specifically defined. It varies from place to place, but I have received, firsthand, I've had people tell me, this is a little extreme, but, why should someone be able to live on Further Lane, and I've worked so hard and made this money? They should have housing, but that doesn't mean they can live on Further Lane. Someone actually, said that to me, and there's a grain of truth in everything. With inclusionary zoning, the municipality has to make the effort to create opportunities around their catchment area. So we, Tom and I, and the town board, we are making an effort to create projects around town. And I'm also very sympathetic. East Hampton School District does have I can only think of 2 students that the Housing Authority is sending to a district other than East Hampton. When you're building affordable housing, you don't want to lump it all together. We need some in Springs. If that school district is bursting at the seams and can't take another child, okay, then senior housing, affordable housing. Somebody might move out of the Acabonic apartments to go live in Springs, and that might free up that apartment for some, so we have to look at it holistically. Inclusionary zoning is very important, something that's constantly evaluated, and we have to make an effort to be fair and spread the housing around. The manor house, you could tuck that on a 2-acre lot, you'd never even know it was there.
Sylvia, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that's why the Gansett Meadow project is so important, is because it's in Amagansett. And Amagansett is a school district that the elementary school goes to the 6th grade. It can afford to have those kids go to that school district. Then we just purchased 6.2 acres in Waynescott, and those kids will be able, to go to a different school district. So it is important to spread it around, and I agree with Katie that it can't all be one school district that takes the brunt of educating kids. And we want these, and that's what school districts are for. They're for educating kids. So we need to make sure that we are, sensitive to our families. The diversity is necessary within our communities. Without diversity, it just is something that is sort of boring. And we don't want to be boring. We need the diversity within our community. We need that fabric to be different within our communities, because that's important to how we're going to function.
Yes, I have a question. I'm Pat Frenzo. I have a question for JP. In your opening remarks, you talked about the impact of affordable housing on your student population. To my mild surprise, you didn't talk at all about how the lack of affordable housing is impacting your faculty and administrative staff. And I'd be willing to guess that the good percentage of them now have to commute to work at your school.
You're absolutely correct, and I tried to keep it as brief as I could. I could go on for quite some time with it. I agree. I think, one of the things that needs to be thought about, and everybody thinks for their children, my children, your children, everyone's children that's represented by this, you want the best and brightest teacher, right? You want the best person to educate your kids. And, sometimes it's a housing issue. Sometimes it's another issue that pops up. But we have lots of opportunities to educate our children very well in our own town, but we don't have the opportunity to educate them well in their own town, stay in their own town, and educate the future children of our town. I think that's something that really needs to be taken into consideration. My daughter actually right now is in college. She's going to be a teacher. Will she come back to East Hampton? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But the biggest question is, if she does, where will she live? She can live with me for a while. That's be great. I don't think that's going to be her first choice. Just saying. But and who wants that? You want to be at that point. You're 4 years out of school. You're getting your graduate. Your postgrad. You're working on so many other things that to live home is not exactly what your goal is. So when you look at that, we lose our kids to go somewhere else to make their area better. And that's a good thing. That's fine if that's what they choose. But when they have no choice, it's difficult. And, to I guess extend my comments further, and I don't want to take too much time, but, when you look at it as an overall plan, okay, we have people that will qualify today for affordable housing or not qualify today for affordable housing, whatever they're applying for. But take it to this step. In 10 years, where are they? Should they still be there? I don't know. Maybe there's a reevaluation process to open the door, say, okay, listen, get on your feet, get established. Now let someone else do the very same. And I know it's not always possible to do that, and I don't know what the process is, but if we don't have sort of a revolving door, you're going to get a backlog. And that's where we are. There's so few houses available that you have to look at that as an opportunity. So people, their life changes, they get a new job, they get married, whatever the case is, their life changes over the course of, I look back on mine, and where I was 25 years ago is way different than where I am today. And, I had no children. Did I think about it that much? Probably not, but I am today. And I think if we can grow and promote from within our own community, it's a better option if we can do that.
Gail?
So along those same lines, and I've thought about this a lot, what Sylvia had mentioned, the manor housing, right? And take that to a different level and say if we could have legal multi-generational homes, not an accessory apartment that's 600 square feet, because from my parents, for example, they have their own home. They have a nice house. They don't want to live in a 600 square foot accessory apartment. I can't live in a 600 square foot accessory apartment. So if you make it so that multi-generations can put homes together, and that would allow for people like JP's daughter to come back. She can take the money that she would put into buying a house, an affordable house somewhere, and put an addition onto an existing parent home, and it becomes a multi-generational home, like Sylvia said, with the manor house style. It's not overburdening the neighborhood, and it's a win for everyone. It's a win for the older parents who may still be in the workforce but want to be closer to their grandparents and their grandchildren and their children. It's a win for the middle-aged children who now have an investment property, and it's a win for the children, the youngest kids, because they have their grandparents around.
There seems to be some precedent for that, too. Fred wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to address Pat's point a little bit also. I mean, one of the things I hear time and again, whether it's from school districts, Southampton Hospital, Main Street businesses, is that they can't find labor. You had the situation after the Great Recession where people would travel great distances for a job, but as the economy has improved, they want to be closer to home. And we are importing a lot of the labor that we do have, and that is why when I'm not working on the affordable housing bill, I'm working on the South Fork commuter connection, so that people can get out of the trade parade and provide an alternative to that. So, there's a social and human need for providing affordable housing, but it rumbles through the entire, the community here, and particularly, I think, in the business community.
Chris, would you like to say something?
Thank you. I remember when we were first talking about Whalebone Woods in the 80s, and trying to figure out whether we were best providing rental opportunities or ownership opportunities. We came up with the concept of recapturing equity, wondering how that worked out at Whalebone and how we're going to work it out with condos going forward.
Well, I can answer that one. It didn't work in Whalebone because no one contemplated that the houses in there would get up to $1.2 million, which I think is the record for what they're worth. You get back 60% of the land, so what? It's still, you can't keep them affordable. On Green Hollow and some of the ones like that, we went to 99-year land leases with the appreciation capped at the consumer price index. The condominiums, because unless you're the state of New York, you cannot do condos on leased property. Found that out the hard way. We are putting a cap of the appreciation to the consumer price index or the appraised value, whichever's lower, to try to keep them affordable. Because we thought, incorrectly, that 60% of the land value. I mean, how valuable, a house costs $80,000. How much is it going to be worth? Hey, you learn. As I say, and as the condo project is proving this point, every time we do something, we both build affordable housing and figure out a better way to do it next time. So it's an evolutionary process. It's the giant product cycle, which everybody knows is you do it, you learn, you do it next time, you learn, you do it. So we learned from Whalebone and from Camp Hero, where people have won the lottery and gotten full value for their house after 30 years. We have much more stricter recapture provisions.
There's someone back here who'd like to speak. We have to remember to get back to Sylvia, too.
Roger Brenner. I'm a professional economist, and I wanted to bring up the fact that Massachusetts has now passed enabling legislation to tackle the complex problems created by Airbnb and VRBOs. The state now requires all renters, whether they're corporate or individual families, to register with the state to pay the appropriate equivalent hotel taxes, and it allows each city to enact even tougher legislation that says you have to identify exactly the site and the renters. And of course, that allows you to enforce your codes because it gives you all the information the government needs to deal with those kind of congestion issues and housing pressures for family and students. So Massachusetts just within the last year has put in comprehensive legislation.
This is statewide?
Statewide, and then the state enabled one level of information to be collected, but they made it easy for a city then to say, and we will go further. And they made an exemption. I think it's 2 weeks. A family can do that without paying the tax, 2 weeks in a year. But if you want to go beyond that, it's recognized you're essentially a commercial enterprise. It's pressuring the housing stock in the ways that you're talking about. And you can't enforce codes without information, so they now have complete information.
Thank you. Sylvia had wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted, JB and I were talking about this actually while we were having lunch. And he had asked about the affordable apartments and homes and the program that we have here. And this is one way, and Gail touched on it a little bit too, one way a child could come back. You could put an affordable apartment in your house, and it would, Tom Ruhle would be the one that you would go to. And it would allow perhaps a child to come back and maybe pay rent, maybe not. So, and then they could go ahead and start building towards, with their salary, building towards, the ability to buy a house in the future. The other thing then, if you are an older resident and you want to remain an age in place, which seems to be the preferred way for most people, is that they can then go into an affordable apartment within their home, and then they can rent out the house. And so those two things, I think are going to be helped. It's again addressing variety of issues and a variety of needs. It's not one size fits all for everyone. So I think the town has done a really good job in trying to find some of these different niches where people can do it. Now, Tom has the numbers on how many affordable apartments we have within homes, and it's not a big number. We have over 100 that could be available, and I think between 13 and 17 is about the average that we have in any given year for an affordable house within a home. The other thing that we did was also you can have detached apartments in your home if you're on 30,000 square feet or more. So, we, again, are looking for ways in order to make it available for other people to want to do this. This means that every resident can participate in affordable housing if they so choose.
I'm sorry, Virginia, if you don't mind, let me circle back to the Airbnb and VRBO question, because I think it's sort of an unspoken element of affordable housing on the South Fork, that there's a lot of effort to build and a lot of effort for the towns to encourage the creation of more affordable housing. But I think the one thing that nobody talks about is the impact of Airbnb and similar sites, and how it has completely removed a lot of affordable year-round rentals from the market. I can tell you that from experience in having my staff looking for housing that's just, it used to be difficult, it's impossible now. Is it something that needs to be higher up on the list of priorities for the region? I mean, maybe the state, but the region certainly, to begin taking a closer look at tightening the rules on Airbnb, with the understanding that the argument against that is Airbnb makes it affordable for some people to live here because they rent their properties out. It's a very complicated equation, but I wonder if somebody up there is willing to tackle this in a broader sense about how important it is to address Airbnb and similar ways of short-term rentals and how that's affecting the affordable housing market.
Well, I think one of the things is that some people, and you see this with LLCs buying houses and engaging in activities, are viewing a house not as a place to live, but as a generator of revenue and doing your traditional discounted net present value calculation. Well, how much can I make if I rent it out for this number of weekends, and I do this? What's the cash flow? I set up an LLC. It makes it hard for the town to figure out who owns it. Every time we propose some form of affordable housing, like accessory apartments, our biggest fear is that it's going to be hijacked by, and that becomes an enforcement issue, which we stay on top of. But it has turned houses from being places to live into economic vessels for making money, and there's a lot of people investing a lot of money in the East End to make money, and that's Airbnb or combos of renting and Airbnb or party houses or share houses. And that's had a huge impact because it's taken, if you're looking for, I'll use a house that's next to mine. It sold for $550,000. It was a year-round couple. They went down to Maryland. They retired. He was a police officer. the house became dumpster material. It's now a 6-bedroom house, and it's being Airbnb'd. Now, they're very good people, but you lost that from the market. That house, if it hadn't been torn down, could have been, possibly an affordable rental. One would hope with the CPF money that we will be, well, not CPF money, but the transfer tax money, that maybe we can encourage people to be able to buy these $550,000 houses before they become teardowns, before they become economic vehicles for, running a business out of a house. But it is pulling houses out of the inventory.
Let me ask a true or false question. If you were able to effectively eliminate the problem of that happening so frequently, would it have a bigger impact on the affordable housing crisis than all of the other efforts to build? How significant an impact would it have if you were able to address that effectively?
Put me on the spot. I still think this, even if you banned every Airbnb, this place is still spectacularly attractive to people to invest in and buy homes and live here, things like that. That said, it's one of a number of tools that would help make things better.
Okay. Sylvia, I'm sorry, I wanted to give you a chance. Oh, Fred.
I agree.
Okay.
And Pat had a question, wanted to say something.
I wanted to, Pat, if you just 2 seconds, thanks. I guess 3 quick points on Airbnb. One, it affects the affordable housing market. I was also surprised to hear from some of my local chambers of commerce that it has an effect on the downtown business district also, because people that are year-round or they're seasonal, they'll go to the hardware store or the home goods store to buy stuff for their house for the season. Somebody comes in for a couple of days, it's good if you own an ice cream shop or a restaurant, but for kind of the mainstays on Main Street, it affects them also. Airbnb, I think, some of this obviously goes to zoning and land use and the ability to enforce, as Tom said. But the third point I just wanted to mention is that Massachusetts legislation, there is a bill that was just introduced in Albany. It just came across my desk, I would say, in the last week or so, that I think is intended to kind of mirror what Massachusetts did. So I don't know what's going to happen with 2020, but I at least wanted to bring it to your attention that there's a bill that's been introduced on that.
I'm going to go back briefly to because Joe changed the direction a little bit, but this accessory apartments idea. So I happen to have it occur in my family. My brother and sister-in-law decided to help their son and his wife and their 2 young children to add on to their modest home in Springs. The plan was mom and dad would move into the smaller part of the house, and their son and daughter-in-law would take over the main part of the house. They did it with a modular. In my opinion, as a builder, the entire process should have taken at most 9 months. As a matter of fact, it's over or close to 2 years for them to finally get a CO. And a big part of that problem is your building department is not up to speed. I mean, this poor couple, my sister-in-law ended up handling most of that. She got whiplashed 2 or 3 times by the building department. And I'll just give you a small example. Oh, you can't have a stove in the additional part. That turned around and said, oh, you have to have a stove in the additional part. I mean, it was really unbelievable. And, I did counsel a little bit. I said, look, you've got to make sure you keep a copy of everything you give to the building department. You've got to make sure you make notes about what they tell you, because she was finding that they tell her something, she go try to do it, and next time she was before them, they completely changed direction on her. I mean, she was tearing her hair out. So, great idea, but with this kind of execution, not good.
I really do appreciate you telling me that, because, my door is always open. This is near and dear to my heart, to make sure that affordable housing is affordable for people, and this is a great example, Pat, of having somebody come back to the community and want to be part of our community, that's been in this community, and we've educated folks here. We want to retain them here. If anyone needs help with doing that, please come to me, please come to Tom Ruhle, and we'll be able to help you with, navigate some of this stuff. So please let me know ahead of time. That would have been helpful.
I had a question for Gail. What Sylvia was describing about, I believe, accessory apartments for multi-generational family situation, would that be or have been something that would have been helpful to you? You need the...
The problem with those apartments is they're 600 square foot. That's the max, and so that needs to be changed. Correct me if I'm wrong if that's changed since the last time that I spoke with Tom, but it's six. How would I tell my parents? Yeah, sure, get out of your house, live in a 600 square foot apartment and I'm just going to take your house over. That's not the whole idea. The whole idea is to make it so it's completely livable and comfortable. I mean, 600 square foot is like, why would you do that?
That's the smallest that a living situation basically can be, right? Or is that just for a single family residence? 600.
Well, 600 square feet is the first rung on the health department's.
Can you use the microphone, Tom?
600 square feet is the first rung on the health department's calculation flow for an apartment. If 600 to 600 to 1200 is another rung. But you can, legally have something smaller. But I don't think that was the point. The point was that our apartments are limited to one bedroom. Accessory apartments are limited to one bedroom. So if you're going to rent the bedroom and have your family move into the house, you're going to be in a one bedroom under the current regulations as they're currently written.
Can I ask this? The two towns have tried some different things to create affordable opportunities. There hasn't been a lot of buy-in, though, from the community, has there? Sylvia, if I understand correctly, both the towns on the South Fork have tried some different things, and there just hasn't been a line at Town Hall to sign up for creating these new affordable housing opportunities. There's been some, but not enough to make a dent.
Well, again, it's about different opportunities, and creating affordable housing within homes. I haven't seen a rush. And one might have thought that having children come back and live with you for a while would have created that, and it really hasn't. The other issue is septic flow. And, we've tried to create and have created legislation so that you can have an affordable apartment above a business. But that also relates to septic flow. And so that's one of the things that's stopping it, and one of the things we're looking at, particularly for Montauk. And that's what I'm hearing the village is also looking towards. If you can get a packaged sewage system, a neighborhood sewage system that's going to be able to take care and allow that flow to accommodate affordable housing above a commercial business, then we'll be able to bring, and I think it's important to bring back people to the business area, because they're the ones that are going to be able to make that business area have a longer season, particularly in Montauk, where we see a lot of these businesses, these restaurants, really can't sustain themselves for very long pretty much after, about this time. And that's not what we want to see. We want to see a lively downtown. We want to see, a bustling downtown. And that's why we need to make sure that we try to work with, and they're not inexpensive as part of the problem, these wastewater treatment plants. Not only for the village. I can remember when the village had a lot of apartments above all of these stores that are here. Those have sort of morphed into offices now. So we've lost that whole group of rental situations that we might have had in the past with the village, when you could come down here almost on any summer evening and the sidewalks were full of folks. And we don't have that as much. And I'd like to see that happen again in Montauk, which is another place where it's a lively commercial area, but then it really doesn't sustain itself over the longer seasons.
I have a question. A couple of things have come up as we've been doing endorsement interviews with candidates in East Hampton Town, One of them is the idea that there's a difference between affordable housing and workforce housing. And there have been some proposals on the table now to start to use something like temporary housing, RVs even, and allowing businesses to use those to create seasonal housing for workers on their business properties. Sylvia, do you want to speak to that? I know it came up in our conversation, I know, but it came up really across the board in some conversations this year.
So it's come up in 3 different committees that I'm the liaison to, which was community housing, the business committee, and the anti-bias task force. They're all interested in seasonal housing because we need workers. They're not going to be here, and except for perhaps hopefully a longer season as we keep moving towards helping our businesses stretch out those shoulder seasons. This was an idea that came up in the Community Housing Opportunity Fund Committee that RVs, think of them as tiny houses, could, depending on the size of the property that the business sits on, could then have a number of these units that could house some workers. They would come within probably an March, April time period and then have to leave the area. So they at the end of the season, we didn't want them to morph into affordable housing for families or for year-round. They would be self-sustainable. They wouldn't add to the septic system. They would have to be pumped just like a boat has to be pumped in the harbor if you're living on it. So we wanted to make sure that, and this is a pilot program. We haven't even presented it yet to the town board, so we haven't had a work session on it. But it certainly is an innovative way to start thinking about how to in the tourist economy, how to house some of our workers. And so I think we're getting close to seeing what the legislation is going to look like, and I have an outline for it. Tom's been very helpful with it. So I hope we can move forward and see if we can do a pilot program and see how it works for the businesses within our community.
Can I add one thing? Yeah. It's going on right now. So the question is there a way to legally do it and regulate it and get it under control, because people are right now, and I won't go in, but in code enforcement's caught a few of them that are doing it. So we're trying to be protective of the people that are in those environments, protective of the neighborhoods, while still allowing something that seems to be happening on its own.
I wanted to ask, I guess probably Tom, what is the argument against increasing the square footage of an accessory apartment? Is this to do with septic or something that would answer Gail's needs?
I've been accused of, let's say, the apocalypse. You do this, it's the end of the neighborhoods, it'll all be two-family houses, it'll be just like Queens. When we have public hearings, we get a different crowd. We get people that believe that is the end of the single-family home. I mean, doing two on a property. There's also some case history from, I think it was Nantucket tried this, or Martha's Vineyard. 1 or 2 islands tried it. It turned into summer rentals, and there were so many people that were violating the law prohibiting them from being rented out that they were able to force the local body to make it legal to rent them out because they were enough of a mass. And you wound up with more density, more people, and not a significant increase in affordable housing. That's the fear. It's a balancing act between two, and the public hearings are a balancing act because any reporters that have covered them know there's a few people that are going to show up and say that you're going to open the floodgates and you're going to have people coming out of the woodwork and these everywhere, and I keep praying for it and it doesn't happen. That's my editorial comment. And on the other side of it, you've got people saying we need affordable housing and the stories. So there's two sides to these, and when you're in the pro-affordable housing people, it's like, why don't you do the two on the same lot? And then the other side has raised valid arguments also that bear at least some kind of, and our attempts in the code are to balance both sides. And if you make them owner-occupied, just to answer one previous question, we made them owner-occupied, so anybody who's not owner-occupied with an illegal apartment is not going to convert it. The other people can't. So, and there's more money to be sometimes made in doing it not legally. I mean, right now I was reading a story about how California's got a problem with illicit marijuana growers that are evading the taxes that were enacted when they legalized marijuana. So we have a problem with illicit apartment rentals.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Another thing that's come up in the conversations this year is the need to address the affordable housing issue in an aggressive way in East Hampton Town. And Mr. Gruber, who's left, but he's a candidate for office, has proposed building some big apartment complexes on an aggressive scale. I think the conversation we had was trying to meet the need of another 1,300 units by building 100-unit apartment complexes throughout the town. Is that an idea that is dead on arrival in East Hampton Town, or is it at least an element of the solution that maybe we need to start thinking about, for lack of a better term, more suburban construction to make it affordable so that it could create some affordable units? I'd actually throw that question open to the whole board because I think you're all, yes, Katie.
Currently, there is a law on East Hampton Town books capping the maximum number of multi-family units you can have on any one project, any one property at 60. We do not currently have any projects that are that large. Accabonac is the largest. That was put in service in 1999, and that's 50 units. That was built on 30 acres of land. It has a private entrance. People drive by it all the time. They have no idea it's there. So, Amagansett, Gansett Meadow, is 37 units right on the highway. So the attempt to build different types of projects, to create different types of opportunities, larger units, smaller units, condo, single-family residence, rental, smattering them around town, in my opinion, is more appropriate for our community. Having really large units and concentrating, particularly at and this goes back to a question, Joe. I think you had asked this. What's the difference between workforce housing and affordable housing? We are currently making effort to do mixed income projects, so it's not, on Avenue A, that's where all the poor people live. On Avenue B, they're all the worker bees. On Avenue C, that's where the grannies go. My professional opinion is that is certainly not the way to go.
Can you talk about who's going to be living at Gansett Meadow, and how much will they be paying there?
Okay, Gansett Meadow is mixed income. 8 of the units will receive Section 8. We have a total of 4 income levels. We're going from below 30% area median income. I know that opens up every time we say AMI, it starts a whole nother conversation. Up through 90%. So there's different. I could answer your question in terms of ethnicity. I could answer that question in terms of income, age, household composition, where are their geographic origin. There's a lot of different ways I could answer
think
that.
Economic might be kind of.
Okay. So 8 of the units are for very low income. Then there's a wide band of what's referred to as workforce housing, where your income, there's a minimum income requirement, 50%, 60%, 90%. You would have to have an income that anywhere else, and I'm addressing this specifically to Gail, your income would have to be such, something that you could live on in another community, just not in this community. So we're looking to bridge that gap. I am aware that there's a large band of people who are over income for any kind of assistance. They don't get help with anything, and they still are a mile away from being able to go out and buy a house or live in any area of town they choose. So we are making an effort to address that. And real numbers, what is that? What is that number? What is that income?
What is that number?
Okay, so for one single person, the maximum gross annual income you could have, no dependents, nothing, is about $76,000. So an individual, young professional, gig worker, doesn't really matter the source of the income. If you made, in the 70s, you could still qualify to live at Gansett Meadow.
And what would be the rent?
The rent would depend upon your exact income. For a one-bedroom, it's and I don't have the numbers in front of me, so please don't anyone hold me to these exact numbers. A one-bedroom is probably 12 and change. Two-bedroom is around 15. Three-bedroom is around 2,000, and there's one four-bedroom unit that'll probably be about 2,400 a month.
Gail, is that affordable?
I don't think that's affordable. I mean, if you look on the rental calculator, right, that I looked up online, it said that in order to the rent that I could afford at $48,000 would be $1,200 a month. That's for a family of three. That's considering my two children. So that would be, and because I have a boy and a girl, I'm not allowed to have a two-bedroom unit. I have to have a three-bedroom unit, unless I make enough money that it's this weird thing. Because I tried to get in. I made too much for the three unit, which you'd have to have 3 bedrooms, one for your daughter, one for your son, one for yourself. But then if you made enough to get into the $1,600 a month thing, you could have a 2-bedroom, because then you could be expected to have a bedroom with your daughter. I could have a bedroom with my daughter, which is what I ended up doing in the last house I was in, and my son lived in an office. But no, I don't think that's affordable. I get that it's it goes with the area, but nobody's going to save enough to get out of that at that level. Isn't that the idea? The idea is to get people past that. Give them a leg up. Let them be there for a little while so they can save enough money and move on. But nobody's going to save any money at that rate.
Michael had a question.
Hi, I'm going to take my photographer's hat off for a minute. I'm a third generation here in East Hampton. I own a cottage, 800 square foot cottage that I can't afford to live in, actually, because I need the income from that cottage in order to survive out here. I've been evicted from 2 apartments in the last 6 years because the places were sold out from under the, and I'm in one now, but these new projects that you're planning, I just want to get a sense of, I know there's probably a waiting list of, however many thousand people waiting to get into these apartments. Realistically, what kind of turnover is there? I mean, do you expect, if I signed up today, would it be 10 years, 3 months? I don't know. I have no idea.
I'd like to go into a little deeper detail on the rents. The rents are actually reverse engineered based on the income calculations. So we can't charge, if a particular apartment is supposed to go to someone at 50% of area median income, we can't charge a rent that's more than 30% of what that area median income calculation is. So perhaps I was speaking in too broad numbers before. There's going to be 4 rents for the 1 bedroom, 4 rents for 2 bedrooms, 4 rents for 3, and 1 rent for the 4 bedroom, because someone whose income is 90% of area median is going to be paying a higher rent than someone whose income is 50% of area median. So this 2-bedroom apartment might be $950. That 2-bedroom apartment might be $1,650.
Okay, I want to get. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we're working on an answer to Michael's question, and then there's a couple of people back here who'd like to speak as well.
Timing to get it.
In terms of how long would he have to wait on a list?
It depends on the property. Each property has its own wait list. You can expect to wait 3 years for anything in town, and you may wait as long as 8 years for a particular property in town. When we have a new project, It's an opportunity for everybody to jump in. There's that term lottery that nobody really likes because it does sound like a handout. It sounds like you're giving something away to the boy with the gold wrapper. That's not what it is. That is just to make sure that the wait list is considered in a fair, random order.
Katie, you were saying you encourage people to sign up for more than one.
For everything, yeah, because today my salary might be $48,000. 10 years from now, I may be retired. I might be living on Social Security. It might only be $24,000, or maybe it'll double. So when you apply, that is a snapshot of where you are. By the time you're called in to qualify for an opportunity, I can guarantee that household's information will have changed. Apply for everything.
Katie, but to get to the point, the heart of the matter, 3 years when somebody's looking for an affordable apartment doesn't seem workable in the slightest. That if you don't even have a chance at an apartment for 3 years, and maybe as long as 8, you're going to leave the area if you're not able to find something in the meantime. Fair enough? I mean,
no doubt. We would like to be able to offer more opportunities in a more timely fashion. Unfortunately, that tends to discourage people, and they say, oh, well, why should I apply? If I have to wait at least 3 years, never mind. And then I'll see them 3 years later, and they'll be wanting an application. So...
and the application process is free and relatively...
There's no application fee. There is no consequence at all. You can always say, no, thank you. My circumstances have changed. I appreciate the opportunity. Give it to somebody else.
So I have a story. My nephew, he's a builder. He's a very good construction builder. Family, 2 children. And he rented a house, a winter rental, for $3,000 a month. But he had to get out of the rental in May. Now he has 2 children in school, okay? So now he has a problem with the school district, right? He's got to move out of the district because he has to give up the rental because school gets out in June. So their solution was to buy a camper. He retrofitted the camper, and they moved from pillar to post at Hither Hill State Park, Cedar Point Park, up in Quogue, Hampton Bays, wherever he went. And this is how this family of 4 lived. My niece had enough. She's been out here. They've been trying to make ends meet, made a good income. She just took off to Colorado. And they've been there for maybe a month, and they purchased a house for $345,000. And I know you're talking about houses for $550,000. I'll just even give you $650,000. You can't buy a house for under $800,000 that you're going to want to live in. So we're getting this drain. Right? All these families want to move. They can't make it. That's hurting our fire departments or school districts. To me, it's a crisis, and it's been coming down for a long time. So as we're talking about housing, what are our goals? How much housing do we want? How much housing do we need? And how fast can we get it done?
Can you give your name, please?
Dawn Brophy.
Thank you.
If I can use this opportunity to throw this to Fred, and I spoke earlier in the opening about the idea that you have about using some of the potential for the Community Housing Fund money to make houses affordable so that if they are $800,000, there's a way to bring that cost down to $400,000 for local people. Do you want to talk about how that might work?
Sure. As I said, there's a number of purposes of the fund. One is for first-time home buyers assistance, which, one of the ideas for that would be that, for an eligible family would be that, one of the great barriers is a down payment, where the town would be able to provide, financial assistance up front. they would get a stake in the equity, and when that house was sold, the town would get its money back and would go back into the fund and would recirculate. We had talked about the ability to be able to do that. So, the proposed state law that would authorize the town includes a program like that. We didn't write it specifically in the state legislation. We authorize it because there may be even more creative ways to give people first-time home buyers assistance. But the idea here, I think, is that it's almost impossible to build your way out of this. Whether it's density issues, water quality issues, political issues, because affordable housing is hard. One of the things you have to be able to do is to make the existing housing stock more affordable. So the towns would have that ability. And again, we leave it up to the towns because South Hull's different than East Hampton, and Southampton's different than Shelter Island. Well, every place is different than Shelter Island. I affectionately, when I go over there, I say, the independent nation of Shelter Island I represent. But they're all different. So, some places they may want to do more, they want to build housing. Some places they want to provide first-time homebuyer assistance. They might want to do partnerships with employers. The bill leaves those decisions locally because each town is different.
But the way it might work in East Hampton, the way it could work in East Hampton, would be her niece would be able to come to the town as a first-time home buyer and essentially get $400,000, find an $800,000 house, have $400,000 from the town to use as a down payment. So you're paying a mortgage of $400,000. When you sell the house 10 years later for $1 million, the town gets $500 and you get $500. You've gotten your money, but it makes unaffordable houses affordable. Correct.
Correct. So that's one of the options under this. And again, the town will have to prepare a plan. They'll decide, what's the best way to get the biggest bang for their buck. But from my perspective, and again, the town's got to make these decisions. Providing financial assistance to first-time home buyers is a critical part, I think. And making existing housing stock more affordable is one of the keys to success, under this program.
Okay.
Can I just
quickly talk
on that? We've already started planning to to lay the mechanism in place for the Community Housing Opportunity Fund and other committees to write the plan that would be backed up by this, hopefully the passage of the 0.5% next November. During that planning process, it's an opportunity for everyone in the community to give us all the ideas they want, they think should be there, and to vet them in that plan, so that we do have ideas and opportunities to do things like that.
Okay.
Tom, I'm sorry. Joe, if I could just follow up, because I didn't mention this. The bill has passed both houses of the legislature. It will go over to the governor between now and the end of the year. We haven't gotten any adverse feedback from the governor's office, so hopefully that's a good sign. But if the bill gets signed by the end of the year, the towns basically from that point, probably for the first 6 months, would have the opportunity in 2020 to prepare and adopt a housing plan to explain to the public how they would use the money. And the idea then would be a mandatory referendum, a public referendum next November.
So that would be next November.
Next November.
With the assumption being money starts to flow in 2021, perhaps?
Yeah,
potentially. That's best case scenario.
Yeah, the tax law is quirky, so even if the referendum passes next November, the imposition of the tax probably wouldn't start until either January or April 1st. It always has to be on a quarter.
Gotcha.
So it'll depend a little bit on timing.
Okay, we're getting close to 2 o'clock here. We do like to wrap up on time because I know everybody has someplace to be. I'm going to give Peter the last word here.
Thanks, Peter Vance Quick, Town Supervisor. I want to thank the press for this opportunity to discuss a very important issue in our community, one which I'm very familiar with and have a great deal of sympathy for. As a young newlywed couple, my wife and I moved 7 times in 2.5 years between winter rentals and trying to get a room in a boarding house until we could really get ourselves established. We had a winter rental one year. which we were assured by the landlord would turn into a year-round rental. We found out 2 weeks before Memorial Day that we had to get out. My wife was 7 months pregnant. So I understand how difficult it is. It's not something that's new, but it certainly has gotten a lot worse, and it's been much more demanding now. We have a lot of constraints here. One of them is funding, and I'm optimistic that the legislation introduced by Assemblyman Thiele, if passed and adopted by the town, will give us a good funding stream to help subsidize housing. That's absolutely necessary. There's a finite amount of available land. I don't think building high-density 3-story apartments, building projects in East Hampton, we know that hasn't worked elsewhere, is the right approach. I think Katie's right about that. We need to integrate people of all incomes throughout the town and not just put them all in one place. We have to have a willing public. We've had 2 recent acquisitions and developments that school board presidents actually wrote letters to the members of the school board and said, hey, wait a minute, your school taxes are going to go up. Well, schools are supposed to educate children. And, that's where the focus should be. We need to have a broad and vibrant community. We heard Lenny Ackerman talk about the village. One of the biggest constraints that both the village faces and the town within Hamlet Centers, as Sylvia pointed out, is septic flow. We're maxed out on septic flow, and without sewage waste treatment systems for the village of East Hampton and for downtown Montauk, we're not going to be able to build affordable apartments in those Hamlet Centers where they really should be, because that's where people would work and live. You don't need a transportation system to support that. But we're going to have to figure out ways of subsidizing that, because the economics for the individual private property owner to build and put an affordable housing apartment in their house are difficult. Those margins are difficult. What's the incentive? Unless they're making a fair amount of money, we certainly support that. It certainly gives people the opportunity to have a detached cottage on their property where maybe their child could come back and live for a while, or where the parents could live and the kids could rent the house or live in the house. But again, I think this is a great opportunity to discuss a very difficult issue. I am optimistic that we can continue to press forward. East Hampton does lead all of Long Island in per capita affordable housing units. That's really all I have to say, and I have to run because I have an endorsement interview with a competing paper.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay, any final thoughts from the board members, panel members? JP?
I just want to say thank you for inviting us to the conversation. I think the biggest thing today is that we're all talking about it. I think there's a lot of options out there. Please don't forget the schools when you do this. I know there's some past school board members here. There's some present school board members here. When you go into your budget season, and you don't, especially if you're a sending district to East Hampton, we tax the outside districts per student to educate them. When you don't know if you're going to have 300 students or 350, it's very difficult to form a budget. And within the budget, it falls in the tax cap, and that's something that has to really be considered by everyone. That you may get 20 extra kids, you do the math, the numbers go up really quickly, and that's something that's been talked about before. Maybe it goes outside the cap, and I know we're not there, and that's not part of this conversation. But if you put a housing unit with 100 units in it, anywhere here, East Hampton is the biggest district and has the biggest budget. But at the same time, it would skew that budget so much, and I don't know if anybody could take that. And I don't know that anybody, aside from the other reasons that someone may or may not want that, the school is a big piece of it, and it's just something that needs to be considered. And thanks again for inviting us. I'm one of our 7 members. I know I'm the board president, but I think our board supports housing, and we did not make the comment that we talked about before. So anyway, just to clarify things, we do have the most housing. We're okay with housing, but we'd like to be invited into the conversation, and thanks again.
Thank you for coming.
All right, thank you. I'd like to thank everybody for coming to our press sessions, sponsored by the East Hampton Press. Our friends, our friends at the Star have a wonderful publication, but this is sponsored by the press. Thank you again for participating. I want to thank Rowdy Hall for hosting us. I want to thank our sponsors. Thank you to LTV for recording it for us. And let's keep the conversation going. The whole point of the press sessions is to spark conversations that continue after we leave here. So thanks for taking part in it today. Round of applause for the panel, please.